where lust for a whole life and nothing but less makes people jump out of a comfortable pond into an unknown ocean. Welcome to that journey between the East and the West. Who says rolling stones don't gather moss? Hello everyone, I am Meenu Gupta, your host for the day, and I'm delighted to have you join me every week as amazing people share their incredible and inspiring life stories of straddling continents. Thank you. Dear listeners, amongst the many international bestsellers that my guest for today has authored is one titled East Meets West. An award-winning designer who has straddled continents between China, Germany, England, Singapore, and USA, Yang Liu not only brings a wealth of perspective, but also a very unique way of communicating it in pictorial mode. Her works have won numerous awards and can be found in museums and collections all over the world. And when not penning bestsellers and managing a studio in Germany, Yang can be found regularly trotting all over the globe, teaching in different universities. Thank you for joining me today, Yang.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, as a beginning, can you briefly take us through your life journey between the East and the West and how and why the first book happened?
Well, the first book was really related to my life. I was born in China and I was migrated to Germany when I was 13. So, and later I lived in the UK, in the US, in Turkey, Singapore, and also lately Indonesia and Thailand. Therefore, East and West was always in my mind. In the beginning was a little bit in conflict when I just arrived, and later it became a constant comparison. So I have this pattern since I was a child to compare. Through this comparison was a very big help for myself to understand the cultures. And therefore it was a natural birth. The first book is basically my German half and my Chinese half in comparison. So I'm sometimes on the red side, sometimes on the blue side. It's kind of a diary of myself. And when the book was designed, I was in New York actually. And that was basically looking back to my 13 years in Germany, 13 years in China. And therefore, the book is also in the format of 13 by 13 centimeter.
Oh, that is interesting. I didn't notice that. Okay, 13 by 13. Very interesting, Yang. And you mentioned somewhere initially there was also conflict before the comparisons or when the comparisons must have begun. Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yes, I think the conflict was more in myself because I was not really adult. So I have not a complete education in neither side. So I was kind of confused of many behavior, many systems in handling different situations from both sides. For instance, a very controversial one is how to dealing with negative opinions. For instance, in Asian countries, especially in China, it's impossible to express it directly towards other people. If you've seen some problems, you would try to talk around it so it sounds nice and still somehow arrive to the opposite side. But in Germany, especially, people do not appreciate this way of handling with conflict. In Germany, people appreciate if you are honest, means you have to talk about the problems very clearly, very directly. To do that is, I think, for any people who grew up in Asia was quite a difficulty to overcome, to really face to someone and tell what you dislike. I think that many of these kind of situations I have met and I have to make my decisions. Sometimes from this side, sometimes from the other side, sometimes it's a combination of both. Or I use different ways to resolve it under different circumstances. It was quite fun actually also.
It's quite interesting. Yeah, I guess the awareness of it must have come into your being and then you must have decided to take a stance. Until the awareness happened, you must have been confused because you said, I think you were quite young when you moved, right?
Exactly. And also, I think I was always in the capital. And when I came to Germany, I came to a very small town in West Germany. And that is also a very big change because I was coming from a very large city. And then coming to a small town, this is also very a big change for me to use to a totally different infrastructure.
I understand. But when you say directly and indirectly, how would, let's say, if somebody doesn't like somebody in the East, in China, how would they put it across?
The way how I see other family members are doing, they're probably just avoid to have too many chances of getting together. This is a way to avoid it. Or just to say something very subtle and the opposite side will understand very clearly, which is sometimes for me very confusing. How do they understood? But obviously everyone understands certain codes. If you say certain things, then it's very clear for the opposite side. Oh, you do not wish too many contact. While in Germany, especially, people need to be very clear, to be very, very clear, to speak everything out. And that was quite a thing that I need to use to. And now is the way around, because I lived such a long time now in Germany. It's much longer than I lived in China, probably even close to 3 times as much. Now I have difficulties not to express things directly. If I do not express things directly, I don't know how to express it. So I have now an opposite problem.
And how is it in, okay, in the other part of the world? Let's say when you were in New York, how was it there?
It was definitely less direct than in Germany. I also had some problems in the beginning when I worked in the office there. I remember we had a client in the US. You always have to say yes to certain timelines, even you can't make it. And that was very confusing to me. My colleague told me, you do not say you can't make it. This is very unkind. You always say, okay, I will try. And that everybody understand you might be not make it. And this will be in Germany considered as a lie. If you can't make it, you just can't make it. You just say it very directly. And that's what I did in my first job in New York. And my client get very offended. He called the company and complained. And he even asked whether this person is from Germany, because he had similar bad experiences with people from Germany. And it was very funny. So at the end, I learned in the US, in a working situation to a client, you always have to say, okay, I'll try. I'll give my best. This is the indirect way to say is not certain. Until the last day, you have to call the client constantly and saying, we really tried, but then we might need to extend it for a little bit, etc., etc. All that was very confusing to me too. I think that was also a cultural difference. Of course, the US, the expression of situations are a little bit more direct than probably in Asian countries, especially in private context. It's definitely no comparison to Germany, how direct people are. In the US, people appreciate, I think in the UK also, white lies. You would really trying to be kind and not say everything. Not express all the truths.
Oh, that is so interesting. Because in all my life, that in my 30 years of professional life, though I was brought up in the East, I was doing it in a Western way, because I always told my clients exactly as it was, because to build whole system of trust, okay, I can do it and I will do it by this time. I always bought extra time and tried to deliver before that. And if there were problems, I would just tell them straight, because then I know that they are in the know. So that seems now interesting. So in your opinion, you are putting countries like US and UK in the middle between the East and the West in terms of approach to directness and conflict. Am I right?
Depends on the situation. I would say in a private context, I think in the private life, maybe the US and the UK are closer to Germany. In terms of contract, I would say that works better with the US and the UK. It depends on the cases. It's very, very, it's a big differentiation from case to case, from detailed situation to situation. For instance, small talk, US and especially US is very close to China. What for content people have for small talks. That is rather contrary. And even there is a big difference between UK and the US. So there is a big difference between the European side and the US side. And that point, I would say US is closer to Asia, but not in other contexts. So it's very depending on the situation.
When you say small talk, how would that work in your context? How is that similar?
For instance, I think the structure of China and the US might be in that term comparable. That is a very large country, each of them, and has very different people with very different opinions and heritage and how they see things. Well, in Europe, countries are smaller. and you could have closer and common sense. I think in Europe people love to talk about politics, also social conflicts, while a small talk. That's how people meet. I've experienced that not only in Germany, in the UK, in Italy, in many countries in Europe. This is a very, I think that I would say is a European universal way how to do small talk, even though small talk is not very appreciated generally, and especially in Germany. People like to have long talks and deeper conversations rather than small talk. While in China and in the US, people love to meet new people. Both countries, people are very open to meet new people and happy to meet new people, make new connections. And therefore, the time frame you would talk to each one is shorter, and but you would then talk about other things. For instance, things that do not hurt anyone, because you never know which kind of religion, which kind of cultural background, which kind of political opinion this person might have. You do not want to create conflicts, so that people try to avoid these topics in a private situation. I used to talk on a party in California about politics, and everyone walked away. And I asked my friend, and he is herself a lawyer for this area, and she told me this is not something people are supposed to talk about in the US on a party, because this is something that is a potential conflict source, and you do not want that on the party. While in Europe, this is the absolute common to talk, to discuss. Sometimes it looks like a fight, but actually only a discussion about politics. And I would say in that context, there is also differences.
Very interesting. I never viewed it like this. And therefore, you have seen diversity in multiple ways in different countries. What is your view there? First, what is your definition of diversity, lived definition?
Well, I have lived in many countries, and I see pros and cons in all these countries. And for myself, I would take out the pros, what I appreciate, would follow many of these aspects from many countries in my personal life. I also celebrate many celebrations that is from different traditions, because I enjoy them very much. I think once you celebrate the traditional celebrations of some other cultures, you really dive into the culture and you understand how people works and why they're doing certain actions. I enjoy my life more ever since I have added more things to celebrate. For instance, usually it follows my travels, because if you travel to a place and stay a long time, you would experience these festivals. For instance, of course, we live a long time in Europe. We do very intensively celebrate all the common celebrations here, and the Chinese traditional one also. But since we also I also celebrate some celebrations from the US. And since we lived in Indonesia also, we also do some of their celebrations, not all. So the ones we have experiences that we liked, and also many festivals from Thailand as we lived there also. And also from our friends who brought in some festivals, we learned and appreciated. We try to celebrate all of them. So we constantly are celebrating something. And I think that makes my children also being very interested in other cultures. They're really, really looking forward for each country we're going to visit.
And since you've not only visited but lived in different countries, where and what is home for you?
Well, Berlin is definitely the place I lived the longest, for sure. And Beijing is my birthplace. I lived there very long also. I have a very deep connections to Beijing emotionally, as I was born there, and my family was from there, and appreciate a lot of traditions from this city. Also, it's a very old city. I definitely very connected to that. But also Berlin is definitely my home where I live also. So I lived for the longest of my whole life out of all the cities. So this is definitely the place I call home. But also Beijing. But it was my home of a certain time period. And I don't know whether this will become my home again, or some other cities. But these two places are the places which I think I would say that's the closest connections. And then New York is a place I also lived quite a while. I still have lots of friends there, and I'm going there frequently. And Indonesia and Thailand, I lived there. Each place is 6-7 months. It's not very long, but I have a deep cultural influence from there. I was very impressed how people see the world. That really changed me in the last few years. The experiences Indonesia and Thailand did leave a very deep footstep in my life. So that even though I won't call them a home, but it's a place that strongly influenced me. Yes, I think each place have left a little bit inside of me.
How did Indonesia and Thailand leave an imprint in you?
I think I learned a new perspective because all the countries I lived before was, for instance, I lived in Beijing, Berlin, New York, and London. I spent also a little bit time in Istanbul. So all these cities are large cities, very cosmopolitan cities also, where have a similar pattern where people are usually very, very busy. And the goals, all these people, even there's very different countries trying to achieve are comparable. They have a certain value. What is supposed to be done in your life? In Indonesia, I was spent 7 months on Bali. And that was during the first pandemic. We planned to be there for 2 months, where my children will go to school there. But we stranded there for another 5 months. So in total, we were there in 7 months. And we experienced many of their holidays. For instance, the Silence Day, which we celebrate still after we left Indonesia. We celebrate every year the Silence Day, where it is the day you do not have any internet, no electricity, not any connections to anyone. You just reflect for one day long. I think that is something we're trying to do. Of course, if you need to work that day or go to school, then you only could do it partially. But I think it's a beautiful ritual. It's not very long. Also visually very appealing. They have this ogu ogu is a figure you need to build and burn at the end of the day. So we're trying to do that every year. And this day really, especially I think in this stage of my life, I think that do change my view on how I want to live, what are the values. And Thailand is an addition to that. We spent 6 months in Thailand in different places. We also visited many temples, and it was very fascinating to see how traditional Thai people are not very, very rare getting angry at all. I was really impressed. They're very slow in everything, but in this slowness, there is lots of very aware life experiences. People are very aware with every moment they are living, and what they're doing was very, very impressive. How they see their lives. So these two experiences in total, maybe makes a year a little bit more with Indonesia and Thailand. But that only changed myself. Also, my children was very influenced on that. We really appreciate that.
So there are two things you mentioned about awareness living or living in awareness. Actually, that is what I would call a very rich life. Being aware of every moment is actually having a very rich life. And you mentioned a place where you learned about the Day of Silence. Which place was that?
That was Bali.
And what was it called? The day you mentioned?
The Day of Silence.
And there, in the Day of Silence, you turn off all the internet and even the electricity, and then you don't talk to anybody, or
you talk to other people, but you do not use any electronic devices. You do not do celebrations. You do not go out. Nobody's working. So when we're in Bali, there is no electricity in the entire hotel. There's nothing. So no TV, nothing. It was a very special experience that you really have a day of relief. No responsibilities and no appointments. And you really have time for yourself. I think this is actually something, especially modern society, actually need one day of a year. We should actually give us the time. What we also have, actually a similar experience was in Thailand, slightly different because Indonesia, they have the Hinduism combined with their shamanism. It's a little bit different than the Hinduism in India. And in Thailand is Buddhism. So that it's slightly different, but I think the content is comparable. In Thailand, we just celebrated a few weeks ago Loy Krathon. You build a flowery basket where you put on the rivers So we did that with the children. It's very difficult in Berlin because it's very cold. At that day when we did that, everything was frozen. So we really have to improvisate how to do this festival. But it was beautiful. So my children remind their time in Thailand, and they enjoyed it very much. There is many things which is really wonderful about that.
You mentioned that there's Hinduism and shamanism in Indonesia, and the Hinduism is a bit different than how it is in India. So how is it different?
I can't tell the difference because I haven't been to India yet, and this is what some friends we have met in some Indian friend we have met in Bali told us. They told me they're not the same as in India, even though it's originated from Hinduism. But the way they are celebrating their traditions is combined with the local culture also, because Hinduism came to Bali in a certain stage, but they have their traditional cultures before. It's sort of a combination of both.
Actually, very interesting. Never thought of it like that. What is your definition of a global citizen, and do you call yourself one?
Well, I would say I think I am. I am, yes. But global citizens are all very different. Everyone is different in their way of their global citizenship. I think is if you really see your cultures linked to many cultures, you don't have to travel constantly. I do travel a lot. Also, my family we do travel really a lot. But I don't think a global citizen have to travel a lot. It's more a mindset. It's more a mindset that is open-minded towards many cultures and put the culture you believe you are from or you are from as one of the options, not as the absolute foundation of everything. So once you put the culture you know or the cultures you know well as one of the options of life, then you can perceive the other ones in a total different way and without predictions and judgment. I think that is very important to receive the word.
Very, very interesting way of putting it. Yang, what do you think of the core value systems in the East and the West?
I think there's many things that are very similar. The terms of good and bad and in terms of helping each other and all that. I think there's many core values that is universal. But there is many other cultural differences. For instance, in Asia, I would say that would be true for the majority of the countries that the collectivism is more in the society than individualism. I think people appreciate if you take care of the collectives. While in the West, I think people appreciate if you, as individual, are functioning. So I think that's probably, I would say, one of the differences that is still the case.
Actually, yes, I have seen that. So also in my experience of living here, I see the individual I bigger than the we. I see the movement of I much bigger than the movement of we in the everyday aspect of living in Western Europe.
Yes, I think this is still a difference. It's of course in Asia, it's also changing. The young generation also put the I more into the front, but still there is a tradition of the community and family that is makes still a big difference.
Actually, I'm glad you pointed that out because I was going to ask you that. Because traditionally it was, as you mentioned, the collective and the we, and the I and the ego is increasing thanks to also quite a bit of the digital age and the, I call it the selfie mania also. Do you think, therefore, when we were talking about core value systems in the East and West, that what we are just speaking of right now are becoming cliched and they are evolving?
Of course, there are always cliches. If you compare two things and put them in the opposite side, it's always cliches involved. So, for instance, my books are all comparisons. So I have to evaluate each of the cliches, whether they are still up to date. If they're not, then this is a cliche. If they are, then it is a cliche, but also a fact. So there is a thin border. I have to be very careful that we do not run into too many cliches. Of course, every person in each country are individuals, and there is always very, for instance, in a country of the size of China, India, or the US, there is very big difference between each individuals. You can grab 10 people of each country and they could be completely different. While in smaller countries, probably there is more common sense, but there is still some so-called cliches that is still true. Like we said, the collectivism and individualism. But that is also depending very much on the way of production. I think with the industrialization, the need of a community reduces. I think that this could be also a reason that individualism is also rising in Asia.
Actually, I found that very interesting what you just said, that with the increase in industrialization, the need for a community also decreases, and we look more at products and less at people.
Of course, in a society, for instance, if you would be farming in a country with agriculture, you're definitely depending very much on knowledges of elderly, and therefore elderly also have a higher position in society. Well, where you have different sources of survival, for instance, through hunting, then elderly might be rather a problem for the survival. I think those are all aspects where our cultures are coming from, and but of course also other aspects, how the political system, which kind of religion and philosophy each country has followed, been promoted, all that plays a role. At the end, what we call it as a culture, but actually it's just what people over the centuries has experienced, and that combined the influences combined in our habits, and that what we call the cultural differences. But if you put the same people in that same experiences, I believe this person became the same if they have the exact same experience.
No, I understand. I also heard, I read somewhere that you were quite shocked when you realized the extent of gender disparity in Germany. Why was that? What is your experience and idea of it in the East, and what had you thought it would be in the West?
Yes, I thought because Germany's feminism movement was actually very well known. Is actually leading, especially in the 70s, 60s. I just read an article yesterday about female rights worldwide. And there is one of the questions, of course, there is rates of lots of problems, especially political related equality for the society, etc. All that aspect, Germany are very good in the global standards. But there is one thing which is quite shocking. There is a question in the questionnaire where they asked if a male use violence towards female. Is that possible? That is understandable. So with all the countries people do the survey, Germany came out as the only country where over 19% of the questioned female said, yes, under some circumstances is understandable. So the survey in other countries in Latin America, the highest was about 9% where people have understandings for that. That was very shocking for me. And what I see in everyday's life is that even though the law from the governmental side and the entire social structure is protecting women very well, and there is many work has been done in that aspect. But I think Germany is a very traditional country in that sense. Until the 70s, in Germany, women was not in the position to decide what to do with their hires. So if they inherited money from the family, they are not in the position to use the money back then freely. And this is really a shocking fact. And still the gender pay gap is still very big. And when I brought my children to the kindergarten, for us, it was very natural because my husband is also from Beijing. From my childhood, it's always my father took care of me, cooked, do the grocery, and do the household. That is how I grew up. The same way is also my husband. I think in a big city in China, the big city people usually are like that the male are doing all these works. And when we're in kindergarten, I was playing football with my son, and my husband was carrying the baby and trying to comfort baby and play with it. And lots of parents talk to us, yeah, something is wrong with this picture of your family, but I can't tell what. And we also have lots of friends who told me this is absolute for them quite a new thing to see that my husband is doing all the housework. This is for us very normal. We were actually surprised that this is not this way in the German families, even though the moms are working as well, but she's doing still the majority of all these duties. This is also changing to a positive one through many really good policies. But still, this is a traditional role model which has never changed. I have to say, in the Eastern Germany part, this is much better. I think one of the, because Eastern Germany had communism, where forced women to work. So they had to compete with male on the job market. I think the outcome was probably similar to China, that female was actually stronger in many, many aspects. That came out through this push, and therefore female from Eastern Germany, I would say, are in that aspect, I would say, is much more modern than in Western Germany.
That is so interesting. I did not know that, and I did not realize that this gender difference and the gender role difference is fairly interesting from whatever I have heard from other places. Somewhere you have also said, I read, that the barrier between men and women is more than their respective cultures. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, some aspects, yes. I think I lived in many places, and all these places I've heard exact the same complaints from male friends about their experiences with their dates, their family members. Some were divorced, married, etc. I've heard exactly the same story and same experiences and same misunderstandings, and that I found very funny. So that that's the reason I started the book Man Meets Woman, and that is comparable to the East Meets West book. There is also a lot of cliches. I have to see whether those cliches are true or not. I think it's difficult for female to making fun of ourselves, and that I try to break through. I think only you are confident enough to also see your role or see your different situations in a more sarcastic way. I think you are more relaxed about the actual situation. I could actually make the changes. Therefore, that book was born. And I think it was quite a long period how I created this book. I really have to remember all the experiences I had with different people, different friends over the world. I spent a little bit time in Namibia also. So even there, I have a local friend from Namibia I met. She constantly wrote me over a period of 2 years about her dating problems. And this is exactly the same as I heard from China or from New York. There is no difference. So even though these places are really far away, obviously there is some common sense.
Okay, so you are saying that the misunderstandings and the culture gap, let's say a culture gap between men and women, is fairly similar in different parts of the world, whether it's the East or the West.
Yes, comparable. There's many aspects that are similar. Of course, there are other aspects that are not similar, but there is many, surprisingly, a lot of similar aspects.
What would be similar, for example?
For instance, women always predict what male might thinking with certain things they have said, or they meant this and that. Well, if I interviewed the counterpart, so my male friends, they usually always reply, they usually don't think anything about it. They just say it because of that. For instance, if male is silent for a very long time, many females think there is something in his mind which is related to the relationship. But most of my male friend told me they're usually thinking about something else, a football game, or their job, or something completely different than their relationship. Therefore, they were silent or not talking a lot. And that is always misinterpreted. And the verse-wise also. So female often expect male to understand through a certain very for male not very clear actions, and they're just very confused. So all that there is a different behavior between men and women, especially in the communications. I see there a very big similarity between different cultures.
And since you wrote this book on men and women, I will ask a question which is perhaps as old as time itself. What do men and women really want in different parts of the world?
I think it's depending on the situation, whether which age they are, which life stage they are. I think what they want actually is not so different, but the way how to get there are different, and there is where the conflicts are coming. And like all my books, if we talk about differences, we can start a conversation. And through this conversation, we can understand. I understand male and woman much better through my own book, because I had to talk to so many people. I have to really read a lot also. So that made me actually understood both sides much better, because every woman is also slightly different. In the European, the modern context, we only have these two genders, male and female. But there is many things in between. For instance, in the indigenous culture of Northern America and Latin America, those cultures used to have much more genders than two. They at least have three, or many cultures had five or even seven. I think this is actually quite interesting, because we're talking about diversity today, but actually this is not a new concept. This is a very old concept. In the indigenous culture, they usually have people who are in between the genders, what we call queer today. Those people usually become leaderships in their tribes, because they have the overview of the male and the female in their tribe. This totally makes sense. And we're missing so many possibilities in our society today due to this narrow-minded way of seeing the world. In this book, I only talk about male and female, but the gradients in the male side and in the female side, there is many people in many aspects are 70% male, maybe 30% female. And some are 50-50, some are 90-10, some are 100. Everyone is very different. So, but there is some aspects that you can tell there is a difference, but there is not a very clear border. Who is male, who is female? I don't think that is so clear.
Actually, that is phenomenal what you have just said, because it makes so much logical sense, even biologically. Because when we even say male and female, and then percentage of hormones which might be higher in one person at labeled as one particular gender may be lower in the other one. So it's actually very, very variable. And yet the so-called cliched male and female differences remain. Now, actually, I find when you mentioned about the comparisons in the book that you wrote, and a lot that you read, and a lot of people that you interviewed, Mars and Venus and the book John Gray once wrote, Men Are From Mars and Women From Venus. Does that make sense?
I think, of course, a part of us are, like I said, if I see my male and female book in comparison, myself are, I would say 30%, many of my actions are in the male side, and maybe 70% on the female side. So I would say we have male and female, this percentage all in ourselves, like East and West. It's not that we are 100% from this culture because your grandparents are also from here. This is not that clear, because we perceive different informations, like how we've been brought up in the role of male and female also. And I think each male had some female aspects, and each female has some male aspects. The percentage makes it. So I don't think this is so important. We define ourselves on one side. Through all my books, no one need to put themselves on one side, but we see this behavior is there, and you can take a use of both sides and make your life very diverse. And this is how I see it, and I think it's a chance for us to see different perspectives.
So that's truly a way of saying, hey guys, there is no black and there's no white. And find the colors in between instead of sticking and finding a label each time to label yourself and the rest of the world as a black and white. Find the colors in between and live and celebrate in the diversity in between. So, having said that, what would your parting words be between the East and the West?
I would say I think we would have a much happier life if we would be open to all these possibilities we have today. And as I am trying to show my children that we are celebrating all the festivals we know, and therefore I think their life will be at the beginning more colorful than mine, because I only knew one culture until I was 13 and I only learned those. So my life became more and more colorful through the years. And I hope that the younger generation will have this colorful world from the beginning. I think this is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me today and spreading the joy of color, not the monotones. And I wish you well on your journey. Have as many celebrations as there are countries and more in the world, not only countries and cultures. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the series Between the East and the West. Do subscribe to the channels mentioned on the site in case, of course, you liked what you heard. I am Meenu Gupta, the host of the series, and I'll be looking forward to your comments. We love feedback. Thank you once again. Namaste and bye-bye.